Hey everybody, welcome here. We're going on, moving up, moving forward with the Canterbury scene. We're up to 1973, gone through like 16 groups already. Coming up to the tail end, last 4 or 5 groups. So we got Isotope. And yeah, we're going to go listen to a couple of their tunes, get a feel for that. We just did Matching Mole. And yeah, just before I jump in, I'm going to keep these intros short. Yeah, there's a poll up for new album Listen Fresh. So we got Gentle Giant, Three Friends. We got King Crimson, Lizard. And we have Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull. And then there's an option to put in your own album for consideration. So, yeah, looking forward to that. That'll be coming up. I'll wait for a few more votes to come in for another week or so. Give people a chance to sort of have their voices heard. And look forward to that big time. Yeah, that's going to be an exciting one. Especially since if King Crimson comes up, listening to it again, but under the new Canterbury knowledge as far as the horn players, the Keith Tippett group and all that, playing on Lizard, which I hadn't noted before, so it's going to really open up a different perspective for me listening to it, I think. So anyway, but let's get to this new one, Isotope. Have you heard it? Have you not heard it before? Gary Boyle on guitar, Nigel Morris on drums, Jeff Klein on bass, Brian Miller on keyboards, Hugh Hopper on bass, and Lawrence Scott on keyboards. And let's see, and some of those members may have changed. Sometimes I put the additional members on, even though they didn't come in until maybe the halfway through or on their second album or their replacements. So I'll get into that after we listen to it. But anyway, let's do this Isotope. I'm excited. This is 1974, so we're really getting in past the psychedelic age and into a little bit more of the fusion-y rock, prog rock. So let's see what happens. So we're gonna just do. I picked a couple tunes off this, just off really scant listening, just needle drop, just listening to tiny little bits of each song, and then said let's do this one. So anyway, we're gonna do "Oh Little Fat Man." Here we go. Not the wah-wah. Getting funky. gotta pause it, but I am gonna rewind it some because I'm gonna hear that again. So I just wanted to say, so Gary Boyle on guitar, Nigel Morris on drums, Jeff Klein on bass. I want to mention some of the groups that they already played with. So definitely Jeff Klein. Yeah, so he played with Nucleus, and he also played with Keith Tippett. I don't remember which album he played with Keith Tippett, but yeah, and then into Isotope here in 1974. Brian Miller on keyboards. I thought he was, I know it's Phil Miller was in delivery, but I thought I saw Brian Miller somewhere in a previous group associated with Canterbury. Yeah, so far, I'm going to go back. Love film Gary Boyle. Yeah, cool tone. Stays interesting, not easy when I hear guitar infusion, they can really, get lost out there, lost in the sauce a little bit, not maintaining that energy. But Gary Boyle, I feel like he keeps it interesting, whether it's the tone, whether it's the stuff, his style, the stuff he's doing, his technique, really good. So he's staying on top pretty good right now. And I'm probably mostly critical of guitar players more than anybody else. So that's great to hear him succeed at what he's doing right now. Yeah, love this group so far. This is stuff right up my alley. It's not, it's improv stuff, but it's also the energy is there, so it doesn't feel like work listening to it. Yeah, and honestly, the bass, if that's Jeff Klein, the bass is coming through like gangbusters. The bass is just pushing this. The drums are the meter, but the bass right now for me is like, if you're another instrument that's playing along with us, you're Gary Boyle, it's that bass right now that would be inspiring me and just like kicking me in the butt the whole time. Like, don't lose this, keep the fire going. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to rewind this a little bit more because I want to hear that again. So let's see. This is a turn up one. Right there, and that bass hits that low. Love that. Okay. So yeah, as I said, overall, yeah, the drums sounded nice. It wasn't something I couldn't really focus on the drums. I mean, they were doing everything was in time. Sometimes when you don't notice something, it just means they're doing their job fine. It's not something that stands out or grabs your attention. either they're doing something that's off a little bit, or they're doing something extraordinary that's going to get your attention sometimes. And the drums were just kind of put there, I think, in the background and meant to do their job and not sort of showcase themselves. Because even in the mix, like, it just sounded all together. It wasn't like they really focused the drums like they did would do like a Robert Wyatt or somebody, so you can hear like every individual drum like super clear. So I think it was just, they put it in the mix in that way. And same with the keyboard. The keyboard was okay. The tone, it was obviously it was kind of muddy sounding, meant to be, and sort of, not something super clear. And again, what they were doing, I think, was more like a rhythm oriented, obviously an accompaniment, and just meant to sort of fill in the space and not stepping on anybody's toes. So I think, that was Brian Miller. Sounded good, did his job. Wasn't something that stood out where I was like, he's doing something, he's essentially doing his job and sort of, adding this extra texture and extra rhythm for Gary Boyle, essentially. So yeah, for me, the standout, what was standing out from the mix was the bass and the guitar, primarily, and the bass just cut through everything and was just like so. The bass was flawless. The bass, to me, was carrying that whole thing along, and the guitar, yeah, he sounded great. It's definitely all together as a group. There definitely was like a rawness to it. It wasn't this like perfectionist, like maybe Nucleus would be, or some other groups that were just, everything is on the high tier as far as the production, the mix, the drums, everything is like put in its place. It's like obviously with some of the sounds and some of the choices there, it was sort of in the moment, so you kind of take it as it is. You can't really just fine tune every little thing. And luckily, and Gary Boyle, even in the wah-wah that he did bring into it, it was used kind of sparsely. He didn't just stay with it forever, thankfully, because it's something that sort of, I think is better, in small doses, and the kind of like wah-wah where he's kind of doing rhythm with it, I was like hoping he doesn't stay with that for too long. Something kind of just like a little too stereotypical for maybe the time, but maybe it was new for the time, but turned into a, something a little bit more standardized. But anyway, 1972, Gary Boyle knew he had to form his own band if he was to have a chance to go deeper into the jazz rock world he wanted to explore. He used to get frustrated in getting a jazz rock world. He used to get frustrated in getting a jazz rock gig. They would say, "Oh, this next tune has one chord, so let's give the solo to the guitar player and let him play wah-wah for 3 hours." And they did, which that's what I'm talking about. That's, a lot of stuff. The guitar is just sort of, it's not up to a tier in the sort of jazz. In the rock genre, sure, you can do whatever you want, but in the jazz, it's much more articulated, even in fusion. So, doing the wah-wah and just going, vamping out, that's like kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of cringy for me not listening to it at this point. And I'm sure at that time too, there's people who just like, they actually want to be musical and contribute in that way, like in any other instrument, like a saxophone would. Like a sax would or another jazz instrument, the guitar can do that also. And Miller had previously worked with Jeff Klein, who was a one-man history of British jazz, and formed Nucleus in 1969. Was also in Keith Tippett, Gilgamesh, and Centipede. Yeah, I forgot that. Yeah, Jeff Klein also in Centipede. So he's definitely somebody where if I see him on bass, I'm gonna listen to it, because he sounds very, very, very good, very, very confident, very, very astute musician. And always seems to, really hold down the momentum. Recorded at Vision Studios in October 1973, the sessions only took a couple days. Once we got the sound balance set up, it was let's go. All first or second takes with no overdubs. So, yeah, that sounds about right. So that's what I was kind of saying with sort of roughness and just sort of take it as it is. They weren't looking to sort of fine tune it and have this sort of perfectionist. So first, second takes, get the feel there. That's what's important. In 1974, they released this album, self-titled, and became quite critically acclaimed. Unfortunately, the band gained equal acclaim for their live performances. Even guitarist Gary Boyle was voted top 3 guitarist in Britain during the time due to a poll in Melody Maker magazine. In the same poll, Isotope picked up 4th place in both LP of the year. So yeah, it's good to see that they got some recognition for that. So yeah, for sure in their, in this sort of jazz rock, it definitely, they came with it in this sort of sense. And I think, I was trying to come up with who, obviously this is by 74. So, jazz fusion, jazz rock fusion, had a lot of competitors and a lot of other musicians who would try their hand at it, out of the jazz and out of the rock side, so, but yeah, to be, to put it in the sort of basic sense, you're looking at like a Mahavishnu Orchestra, or similar to like a Return to Forever, or you can probably think of, some other jazz rock, maybe even Nucleus. But these guys sound like, like they're sort of like, that's more live, just good players. So yeah, between Jeff Klein and Gary Boyle, and whatever drummer and keyboard player they had, sort of holding down that, I feel like they were gonna, have a great sound, great energy together. Well, let's keep it going. Let's do one more, and this one is called Honky Donkey, and here we go. was Honky Donkey. Did not pause that. So I was listening to each piece, and actually I was listening to, because I was trying to figure out who, yeah, as far as, yeah, my first thing is, yeah, I think it's it's fantastic. It's wonderful. I felt like Nigel Morris really came out, and he was sort of a little bit more prominent there in the mix, and just felt like he was part of the crew as far as gathering the attention, the spotlight on that. So yeah, still the production, could have been probably a little bit, could have been a little bit more accentuated in certain ways, just to sort of lift it up into this tier. So, and yeah, as I want to say before, what I said before about Hugh Hopper and Lawrence Scott, yeah, so they were actually the replacements after this album. Nigel Morris, sorry, Brian Miller and Jeff Klein left the group, and I'll get into some of that. But so yeah, Hugh Hopper and Lawrence Scott were the ones that were their replacements. So this is just, yeah, Gary Boyle, Nigel Morris, Jeff Klein, and Brian Miller. And so apparently most of the songs on this were actually written by Brian Miller on keyboards, except for this one, Honky Donkey. This one was Gary Boyle's one track on this album. And but I mean, they all feel kind of like he kind of contributed a lot. But what I like about them is that they have these little, they seem to, so far on these two tracks, they have those little interludes. They sort of have these breakdowns where they just have little melodic interludes. They bring everything down and they come back, so it gives it a little bit of more diversity, more of and they're a little rough around the edges. They're not mixed to be like, exactly in sync with each other. You can tell like they're, it's very live in the moment, so you kind of get you feel the overall, gravity of the situation, but it's not like, it's not perfection as far as everything's not perfectly in time with each other. They're not harmonizing exactly together, and the production isn't like 100% together. So, yeah, and one of the things I want to mention, just because we talk about the groups, but yeah, this one, I mean, there's not much to sort of break down as far as, harmony, melodically, and all that stuff, and rhythm wise. These are like great jazz rock vamps. There's sort of, there's some basic chord progressions. Once they get the blueprint down, it's kind of like off to the races, and then they just get these little interludes where they kind of break down with these little sort of quick little melodic things that kind of bring down the energy. Yeah, and that's basically it. But then there's a lot of musicianship. So obviously I love the drummer on this, Nigel Morris. To me, he really like showed off here, super competent, really high level. And then you had Jeff Klein, kind of took a back seat on this one a little bit, but still held his own. And then Gary Boyle, and I think even Brian Miller for me, and Gary Boyle. To me, they all kind of really coalesced here and came together, all kind of like pulling their weight, in a great way. So yeah, I really like this. It was enjoyable to listen to. Yeah, and lastly, in reading some, reviews and other people's, while they got a lot of acclaim for this, and I think they probably were like a really good live band, obviously as a studio album, it kind of puts it in a different tier as far as, what people are expecting from a jazz rock group and the sort of, production quality and all that. So, but I think a live band, and as an album, it's great to listen to, but for sure as a live band, you're gonna give up a little bit more to sort of the spontaneity, the improv, being in the moment, and the energy versus, hearing these little things and what are they doing here? Why doesn't it sound like it's, synchronized right or whatever? Anyway, but yeah, and listen to some reviews, comparing this to like I said, Mahavishnu Orchestra or Return to Forever or Billy Cobham's group afterwards. I've read some really good things about them, and then I have other people like, oh, these, he couldn't string John McLaughlin's guitar, or Nigel Morris, he's not a Billy Cobham. And then the only group, there were some reviews gave him some, positive mentions in that, or like Tony Williams' Lifetime, and it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously, if you have to compare yourself to Tony Williams and Billy Cobham, in being in any kind of jazz rock, style, you're gonna you're gonna feel like you're climbing Mount Everest. I mean, yeah. So I mean, I don't think you should. If you can't do that, if you can't be up to their tier, you shouldn't be talked about. You know. I mean, Nigel Morris, yeah, he's no slouch. He sounded awesome here. If the production was better and they really focus on his drums like they do Billy Cobham, I feel like, I feel like he would be, very well respected, being in that grouping. Yeah, he's not Billy Cobham. No drummer is going to be exactly like the other, if that's what you're searching for, or Tony Williams. And John McLaughlin, whether Gary Boyle is not a John McLaughlin. Yeah, honestly, John Mahavishnu is more than John McLaughlin. Honestly, I like Billy Cobham, but I also love Jan Hammer, and I love the I don't remember the violinist's name, but to me, they add immense amounts to the group. So without them, John McLaughlin, it just ain't gonna get it. And honestly, he can go overboard sometimes. It's just too much. I don't hear the spontaneity. I don't hear the creativity. It's whatever. I know I'll get a lot of backlash. Sometimes he sounds fantastic, and sometimes it's just like, enough already. It's not there. And yeah, I didn't. To me, Gary Boyle, like he's very consistent straight across. He's not peaking. He's not like perfect. He's not reaching the heavens, but there's no real lows either. He's sort of like a little bit more middle of the road. But to me, if you're not repeating yourself, if you're in a solo and you're not repeating yourself, I could hear he's got a little thing where he does the da-da-da-da-da-da. He's kind of focusing. He's like focusing around like a sort of a nodal point, like a note, the sort of foundation note, the root note. He's sort of focusing on that sometimes just to get his footing before he sort of goes off and explores a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I thought he's closer to me, kind of like a Jan Ackerman. He kind of sort of sits in that pocket and then just sort of has a stream of consciousness and sort of just goes off on sounds, and uses the scales and the sort of technique and sort of going off on a little bit different. It's not afraid to get crazy, a little bit crazy with it. He sounds a little bit closer, like a Jan Ackerman on his first solo album, Profile, that I listened to. I'm not saying putting him in that tier, but sounds, in the ballpark. So anyway, yeah, it's interesting to see other people's opinions about it for sure. And I can certainly, it's easy to compare people to other people. Sometimes it's, that's the one way to do it. And I'm certainly guilty of doing that myself, But yeah, it's fun to hear other people's ideas of, musicians not being good enough or what their style is. Maybe they're a one-trick pony. Yeah, maybe they are a one-trick pony. That's all. They do one thing really well and don't go outside of that. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed each musician. Sort of, I felt like they all held their own. I feel like live, it'd be really exciting to sort of just be in the moment and see them do their thing, and so in just that sense, I feel like they're doing something, pretty exciting. And yeah, it didn't feel like they were treading the old territory, doing the same thing over and over again. But anyway, yeah, compositionally, they could do something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more, avant-garde, something a little bit more unique. Yeah, they're not diving in too deep, they're sort of focusing in more on the improvisation and just sort of getting the energy up and sort of getting their own ideas out there, Just lastly, yeah, the band was always about improvisation. They're really just fragments of themes with loads of improv, as I said, yeah. So there's not a huge compositional achievement here necessarily, but in concert, the band packed a punch and gained a very loyal and musical audience who clapped after every solo. Given the speed of the band's rise, it was perhaps inevitable that tensions grew about the direction of the band, which led to a split. Gary and the management moved to a more rock emphasis and proposed Jeff should leave. Boyle readily admits his ambitious, immature way of dealing with the situation. He was a young bonehead, he admits. So yeah, that led to their split, and it's unfortunate, yeah. So Brian Miller and Nigel Probably was Jeff Klein. Sorry, Jeff Klein and Brian Mailer ended up leaving, and they brought in Hugh Hopper and Lawrence Scott. But yeah, in the middle of the group, it's all about direction. Once you have a lot of success, it's like, okay, you got 4 different guys, all kind of like, it's a new negotiation. So, but I appreciate it. Yeah, so cool getting into Isotope. So yeah, we're gonna continue on. I think we have Hatfield in the North yet. We still have Gilgamesh, Quiet Sun, and National Health, and maybe some other groups. I'm kind of have some on the outskirts that we may add in last minute, but yeah, we'll start with that. So again, yeah, go hit that poll. We got a full album coming up. I want to jump on. It's a rough one. We got Jethro Tull against Gentle Giant against King Crimson, or your own choice. So not all equal candidates for me for a great listen, but let's just see what everyone wants to do. Anyway, so I appreciate it, and I will see you on the next one. I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you enjoyed Isotope. Let me know your thoughts about them, and where they fit in with the jazz rock groups that you like. So take care. Have a good one. Bye-bye.